Hello there and welcome to the Coffee with Colm, and thank you for joining me. I overheard a phrase in a coffee shop recently. I thought it was fascinating. I was sitting in a coffee shop one Sunday afternoon recently, and just above the din I heard this man say to somebody he was sitting with, I heard him say, "Data is the new oil." I thought that was a really interesting phrase, so I took a look to see what was going on, and my take on what I saw was he appeared to be what I would consider a university lecturer, and she appeared to be a third level student, and she was scribbling notes and he was talking, and he had come out with this phrase, "Data is the new oil," and she said, "Explain that to me." And he basically went on to say that oil made people very wealthy back in the day. Oil producing nations back in the day have been known to hold non-oil producing nations hostage because those who control the oil basically are in charge, basically control the conversation. And but he said data is the new oil, but unlike oil, data will never run out, and in fact will increase exponentially and forever. Really interesting. So data is the new oil. And it got me thinking about some of the stuff that you and I are aware of, perhaps subliminally, but we need to give it a little more consideration. Have you ever wondered why sometimes you think you have just thought about a vacation, right? Or a city break, or a new pair of shoes, or a new car of a particular type, and all of a sudden you realise that every time you go to the web somewhere, well, then there's an ad for some paradise island that you've been thinking about, or the city that you've always wanted to visit, or the pair of shoes that you'd really love to spend a few bob on, or the car that you'd really like to have. So here, have you ever wondered how you appear to be just thinking about this type of stuff and all of a sudden ads start popping up all over the place? Well, it's not quite as simple as that. Now, back in the day, it was somewhat as simple as that. Back in the day, there's a thing in our brain called the reticular activating system. And it's a part of the brain that basically filters information because we're bombarded by billions and billions of pieces of information all of the time. And the reticular activating system is a part of the brain that basically filters that and only sends through to our conscious mind that which is of interest to us, which would keep us safe or is in fact currently of interest to us, and it filters out all the rest of the noise. Okay? And that goes to explain how back in the day when you did think about changing the car and you picked a particular model and a particular colour, all of a sudden they seem to be everywhere. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. Or you thought about a particular vacation destination and all of a sudden everywhere you looked or on the telly there was an ad promoting that particular destination. And that's simply because you had decided that this was of interest to you, and your reticular activating system said, okay, if that's of interest to Colm, here you go. There's a car of that colour and make. There's that holiday destination. And it's simply putting information in front of you to be of use to you. Okay. Back in the day also, there was this lovable character on Sesame Street, a Muppet called the Cookie Monster. I'm sure you remember him, right? And the Cookie Monster was this lovable character, and all he wanted to do was eat cookies. But there's a new Cookie Monster on the scene. The original Cookie Monster came on the scene in 1969 through Jim Henson's Muppets and Sesame Street. But the new Cookie Monster is the HTTP Cookie Monster, and you're familiar with it. Every site that you go to says this site uses cookies, click here to accept that cookies is okay, and we all click and accept and away we go. But in fact what that's allowing the Cookie Monster to do, the HTTP Cookie Monster do, it's allowing them put a small amount of data onto your device saying that you've come here and you've expressed interest in this particular product or service. And that's why instead of you having just thought about a vacation or a car or a pair of shoes, you've actually clicked something somewhere or liked a photograph somewhere or did something, interacted somewhere with the web, and basically told them being the purveyors of big data, you basically told them what you were interested in, and they, being of service to you, have decided they're like the 21st century AI version of your reticular activating system. They said, okay, that destination is of interest to Colm. Here you go, Colm. So every time I go to a particular website, if I've expressed interest in a particular destination, I may expect to see ads popping up here and there for vacations to that particular destination. Or if I express interest in a car or like a photograph of a particular car, well then I may expect to see images and ads associated with that particular car. And that's big data. That's the world we live in. And the Cookie Monster that we need to get used to is the Cookie Monster that allows that big data to create a picture of you and I in cyberspace. You and I have been leaving digital footprints and digital fingerprints for years without even knowing it. And now that we know it, that doesn't mean that we should change our activities. It just means that we need to be aware of it. But there's also opportunity in it. If data is the new oil, or data is the new oil, and I believe it is, well then is that good or bad? And my answer to that is it depends. And it depends on how you and I decide to look at this, right? If data is the new oil and he who controls the data controls the conversation, well then there's nothing stopping you or I in today's world with the power of the web. Well then there's nothing stopping you or I controlling a small amount of that data, or indeed as much of that data as we choose to. Whereas if we were asked to go out and raise millions to attempt to drill for oil in the North Sea, I think that would be much more challenging for the majority of us. So data is the new oil, and if data is the new oil, the question is, what opportunity does it bring for you and I? You see, people always want and need things. People always want and need things. And all commerce has been derived from the fact that people always want and need things. And commerce is very simply where people want and need stuff here, and you find people over here who decide to provide that, and they provide a solution to the wants and needs over here, and that's how commerce happens. So the web simply allows that to happen a little more easily. And really what it's doing, those cookies, all they're doing is they're out there hunting for people who, for example, are in the market for holidays, and then teaming them up with providers of said holidays, right? And that's why you begin to see the ads. You click on an ad for a particular Paradise Island destination, and all of a sudden the cookies say to the holiday providers, Colm's looking for a holiday on a Paradise Island, and they say okay, and automatically those ads start appearing wherever I go. That's just the way it is. Is that good or bad? As I said, it depends. If I choose to look at that as a service being provided, I see it as good. If I choose to look at that as somebody trying to put their hand in my pocket, I see it as bad. And of course there are shysters on the web as much as there are shysters out in the offline world, but that's just life, okay? The reality is most people are there to help, and most people are wanting to put their product or service in front of people, not to annoy them, but only in front of people who are actually interested in their product or service at the particular time they are. So if data is the new oil, well then maybe the HTTP cookie monster isn't a bad guy after all. Maybe he's actually there to be of service to us, and maybe we should embrace it from two perspectives. One, from the perspective of making it easier for us to search for products and services that are of interest to us, because it'll align us with providers of same. And secondly, I think there's an opportunity for all of us if we start to get our head into the game. So if data is the new oil, and I believe it is, well there's nothing stopping you or I taking advantage of that. And taking advantage of an opportunity is not the same as taking advantage of people. Taking advantage of an opportunity is simply that. And if that opportunity exists, and I believe it does, well then I think you and I would do ourselves a favour by at least considering how we might get on board with it. And I think that's something we must do. We must get on board with it. And if I may suggest to you a starting point, if data is the new oil, and it is, well then I'd ask you to look at your website. Look at your website. Is it pretty? I'm sure it is. Is there any amount of information on there to help us all understand who you are and what you're about? I'm sure there is. Is it useful? I'm sure it is, right? Is anybody using it? Probably not, right? Probably not, okay? Your website looks great, there's loads of information there. Is anybody using it? Are the right people using it? And the answer is probably not, let's be honest. Probably you're not getting enough traffic to your website. They're not going to the right places. They're leaving it all the wrong times. They're not making purchases. They're not engaging with your product or service. Data is the new oil. There's a ton of data sitting underneath your website, but most of us aren't mining that data. So I'd suggest to you, if I may, that you might start with your own website. Start to see what's going on under the hood of your website, and there are many providers of a service out there that can help you just do that, and I'd be very happy to recommend one. If you'd like to PM me, I'll send you a link. But start with your website, and don't just look at how pretty it is and how the flow is. Get under the hood. Data is the new oil. That's where the oil is. If data is the new oil, it's under the hood you need to be drilling, not looking at the lovely pretty pictures on the surface. And I'll leave you with something to consider. Uber is the largest taxi company in the world, yet it owns no cars. Because all Uber does is it takes drivers, people with cars, and connects them with riders, people who want to lift. That's all it does, okay? It's a technological company. Airbnb, the largest hotel company in the world, owns no properties, because all it does is it takes people who've got bedrooms available and connects them with people who want bedrooms. Right? That's all it does. It's a technological company. Data is the new oil. So if Uber is a data-driven enterprise and Airbnb is a data-driven enterprise, well then why are you and I resisting? Doesn't make any sense. My friend, data is the new oil. In fact, that very phrase, data is the new oil, is new data for most of us, okay? And if data is the new oil, well then the question is, what are we going to do about it? It's an opportunity for all of us. It's a level playing field out there because of the web. Question is, how are we going to put it to use? It's said that there are 3 types of people in this world. There are those who make it happen, those who watch others make it happen, and those who simply ask, what happened, right? You don't be in that third category, and I'd prefer if you weren't in that second category. So why don't you and I go out there and do something with this? Data is the new oil. Let's go and make it happen. And thank you for joining me for this week's Coffee with Colm. I hope, as ever, and trust that you got something from it. If you have done and you think somebody else would benefit, I'd be delighted if you'd pass the link on. If it's your first time here, you've enjoyed it, you want more of this type of stuff, well then go to the homepage, ColmO'BrienMotivation.com, leave me some details and I'll make sure you get a link like this on a regular basis. Most importantly, please consider what's been shared here today and apply it into your thinking for this next week. And then equally as importantly, please come back next week and we share another coffee together and I'll ruminate on some other aspect of life and business. Between now and then, get some good coffee if you can, get some fresh air for sure. If you spend a lot of time with people, I recommend you spend a little time alone. If you spend a lot of time alone, I recommend you go and meet some people. And then when the time is right, and only when the time is right, get your head back in the game, get organised for the week ahead, get stuck in, make next week count, and I'll see you here this time next week for another Coffee with Colm. Sláinte. Really love great coffee. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.